Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Meta and Apex Legends competitive podcast. I'm your host, Burke, and today joining me is professional caster for the Apex Legends Global Series, Zephyr. And today we're going to be discussing the work and knowledge that it takes to effectively cast an Apex Legends tournament at the highest level, the takeaways that players and coaches can take from this preparation that goes into a match day, as well as diving into his time coaching at the collegiate level to examine how observing and analyzing gameplay can make you a better coach and player, while also taking a little peek into how the esport is growing and getting more competitive in the lower divisions. So, Zephyr, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I like talking. There you go. So you've already summarized it up the best of your ability, and I'm more than happy to do that on a podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I definitely, I think you're the right person to talk about a lot of this. And I try to cater my discussions around who I'm talking to, and you're one I've wanted to get on as ever since I conceptualized this about 2 weeks ago. So so I appreciate it.
Okay.
Long list, right? Long time. I did want to talk a little bit about your journey because obviously probably a good amount of people know who you are. If you don't, then you're probably not really watching competitive Apex, which is totally fine. You're always welcome. But how did you get into casting for the ALGS, and would you say that your pursuit for casting was driven first by like a passion for the casting itself, or more of your passion for Apex as a game?
Okay. Yeah. So just to kind of like put it out there, I started casting in 2019, back when I had just or I was just finishing high school.
Wow.
I was just graduating high school, and I actually was a league caster, and I started out doing a lot of volunteer League of Legends work. Pretty much across the board, and that was just simply because during high school that was the game I played. I primarily played League. I had friends who played League, and that's what I did. And I just kind of fell into it. I was also a big theater kid and some other stuff. And due to some choice encounters, I ended up starting to pursue casting as a career. And a huge shout out to those who got me there, Kangas and Cubby and a few other folks. But ultimately, as I was progressing, I got to roughly about 2.5 years into it, kind of juggling a little bit of full time work, and then into college when I started that. And I realized that even though I was doing a lot of volunteer work and making big strides, kind of blowing up a lot of my fundamentals, I wasn't really going anywhere with League. And I also kind of looked at the talent ahead of me in League who had been there earlier, and I realized that I wasn't probably going to be on LCS ever, right? It just didn't make a lot of sense. And so I thought to myself, well, I really want to make esports my career. I love casting. I loved putting in the work. I love doing a lot of those things. And so in 2021, I decided that I would start looking elsewhere. I would start exploring things outside of League of Legends. And the first game that absolutely came to mind was Apex, because especially around that time period, season 8-ish, 9 up to 12, that's when I really started getting back into the game, especially because I finally got a new PC and I was able to like really, really run Apex. And while, yes, I did start playing back in 2019, one of the big caveats of Apex for me was the fact that I couldn't actually run it on my
Mm.
computer
Yep.
until, yeah, I've kind of like got coming out of full time work and a bunch of stuff I was finally able to afford and build the PC that I still use to this day. And so I jumped in Apex, really loved it. I was having a great time. And then I thought to myself, well, I can absolutely start casting this. And, one thing led to another. And I got some of my first ever gigs using a lot of the background that I had from League and that experience. And then, of course, from there, I ended up working with some great organizations such as Game Time. And one of the greatest things that ever happened was the fact that Apex was just starting to form how the ALGS worked and
Right.
the format. And I kind of swooped in literally as that was changing. And so I ended up being very lucky alongside Game Time to be one of those first individuals to cover the Challenger circuit alongside folks like Dia, of course. Everyone
Right.
knows Dia.
He killed me in
Uh,
ranked.
yeah, yeah. You'll see him. You won't see me, but you'll see him. And basically, what ended up happening is you're sure is between Game Time and then into versus gaming as that became a thing, and then of course across organizations that used to exist like Esports Arena, Nerd Street, and plenty of other places. I made a lot of my footing in Apex, and then started to really find a place where I was actually making a career and making money, and then of course at the beginning of 2023, as we were getting into year three, split two. I finally got the call up to be a part of Pro League. And then, yeah, this has been my technically second split on Pro League. It is now year four. I got the chance to, do a little work on the championship, which was an absolute awesome blessing, especially because I didn't even think I was going to be there. But now we're just kind of trekking through, grinding, getting ready for the first LAN here in LA, and I don't know, sky's the limit. I feel really good about Apex, and my career alongside it has really never been better.
That's great. It's crazy to see that journey, right? Because I think you, like you said, you really started with an interest in casting and put a lot of work in, and then had that
Right.
really good timing of coming in right when it's when they needed you for that. But I think it's really interesting to go into the work you put in behind the scenes, because I think that is something, especially when you're watching as a viewer, and especially more so if you don't really know a whole lot about the competitive scene. I think you see the casters and you don't quite realize all of the work that they put in, both during the, I guess
Hmm.
performance, for lack of whatever, casting, during the actual show, versus like also the work they put in behind the scenes to be able to kind of know what's going on and speak to those things. Because I mean, you have to do it, you're having to give live commentary. I think you have a little bit of a pre-up to that, right? But still mostly live commentary.
Yeah.
What is, I kind of want, I want to be able to dive into that, because I want to kind of be able to pull out for this, people that are watching have something to take away that they can put into their practice, whether they're a player or coach, whether
Sure.
they're in Pro League or trying to get into Pro League. I wanted to talk about the preparation that you put in as a caster. And we can start going into the regular season. Like, before coming into split one here, what is the preparation look like for you?
Okay, so I think two big differences that I want to well, maybe pull back the curtain a little bit is the fact that there's individual preparation and there is also assisted preparation, and
Interesting.
you can't be a caster without either. Of course, individual preparation is what you do with it, right? Ultimately, um, learning about the teams from both a statistical and a narrative perspective is a huge part of revving up for a lot of these splits, especially coming off of things like roster mania. And so of course, like with split one, just getting a general notion for where all these teams are regarding their journey before they get into split one, kind of what their motivations are, and then of course their histories. Like I said, the statistical side, you can go back, you can really look and see where some of these players have been more effective, and now whether with similar combinations or new combinations, how are they going to end up, right? And then on top of that, you have assisted preparation, which is my fancy way of saying, you're not alone in this. You've got
Right.
a huge team of co-casters who are also looking at the same concepts. And you also have a series of lovely folks, of course, over at Esports Engine, who handles a lot of the ALGS broadcasts, who are also trying to form and push the narrative in these directions where they themselves are putting in the research alongside the casters to highlight what we know best, and then of course put that on the broadcast. And so I mean, I can go absolutely deeper here, especially because as we go into the split, then you start getting a lot of that hard data and those hard storylines that
Right.
are occurring as the days go on, and you're able to really, really look at it. I don't know how this podcast works. I don't know if anyone's ever going to be able to see anything, but
I
I
can
shot you.
absolutely pull something up. Yeah. So if you have
Okay,
something to
cool, cool.
share.
Um, I mean, I could go literally on for days
Lem-
about this because I'm, especially when you compare me to a lot of some of my co-casters who I'm good, straight up first and foremost do a lot of really, really hard work. Um, I definitely though in comparison to them am very much a guy who loves his hard data, loves his numbers, loves to export and really see where teams are ending up and stuff. And so like last split when I was my first split on Pro League, I would do stuff like timing data, where I
Yep. I
manually
just
went
pulled
through
up
and
your split to EMEA time data.
yeah,
Is that the one you wanted to
yeah.
talk about first?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just one example, and we don't really have to go that deep, but this is literally like the average time it takes for all of these teams across their match days to get to their individual zones and how quick they are at
Interesting.
rotating, and I mean, a lot of the kind of speed and pacing behind them. And I don't always do this, but this is something I did for last split, and it's definitely was quite a bitch and a half to put together,
I
especially
bet.
because there is no manual description for when a team reaches a zone. So I had to go back and watch every single team's game, all games, all days, all series, and then literally time track exactly when they got into each specific zone and then take that back out and calculate it, which took a very, very long time.
Do
And
you do you
that's just something
use
like,
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna ask if you used Apex Legends status for any of this data, because I know that you can
Yeah,
track their loot
this
pathing
came
and stuff. Is this all
directly
coming from there?
from.
Okay.
Yeah, so Apex Legends stats, huge shout out to Hugo. This a lot of what I do has come directly from abusing a
Yeah.
lot of those data lines because I trust me, I literally would not be able to do so if otherwise. Another really great thing is this, and then I get to look at stuff like this and then turn around and be able to talk about like, okay, so Alliance is slow, but how slow, right? And
Right.
now I have the hard data to say, well, they're this slow. They're one of the slowest starting looting teams. Why is that? Well, then the great part about that data is you get to say, okay, we know they take 3 minutes and 26 seconds. Why? Well, they started lightning rod that split, right? And the way they abused the IMC armories, which were still a thing back
Mm-hmm.
then, right? Alongside their distance from most rings on Stormpoint, which used to be a much larger map. I mean, it kind of colluded in what was that kind of speed of their rotation, which, by the way, you see that they, as you track that line, get faster. They become a faster team that moves their way into zone more effectively as the games go on, right? So
Right.
it's like little stuff like that that you get to kind of draw parallels from. And then, of course, the next thing I sent over to you, just because it's another great thing. This is from this split. This is something I put together during split one of both North America and EMEA. The North
Oh,
American
interesting.
one is going to be a little dead in the water. I did post the stats in our private stat portal that we have in our private Discord for ALGS, but I deleted it because I wanted to make it prettier and then never ended up doing it because
That
I'm
happens,
whatever.
right? This is
It happens.
interesting. I like this.
But like that's like average points, average placement, average KP, and all the data that goes alongside it for when a team hits their Evo timings. And because Evo timings was such a huge thing that was added in season 20,
Right.
I mean, I really wanted to understand where these teams were coming from. So you can
Right.
see that very clearly there for
This
EMEA,
is
and that's all set
interesting.
up. And you could see a lot of that, and there's trust me, we could sit here and talk all day about what you can extrapolate from this. And there was a great moment where our one of our producers, Ben, saw that Passion was making like the timings weren't lining up, and we were able to literally go back in and look at their loot paths and see exactly why that was. And it was because they were moving super quick in the early game after getting their blues and then setting themselves up directly in zone. But that
Okay.
meant they were getting their purples slower than any other team, right?
Right.
Literally the second slowest out of most teams.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
it was literally because their rotations, which you had to go dive and look at, came alongside what was quick blues, go immediately to zone, sit there, get your purples later than everyone else, but have that position in zone. So fair. I mean, just a one of the many incredibly interesting things you can pull from stuff like this, and of course, and then on top of that, just one last thing, like this is POI data. This is
Yeah,
I'm
this is
getting ready
the
for
images you
internet.
sent me to, right?
Yeah. So this is me getting ready for the LAN, and so I
I'll pull these
compiled
up. Just give
every.
me 1 second.
Oh, actually, you
So.
know what? I have the raw stats. I just realized I always keep things on sheets. I don't know why I'm sending you images. Here you go. This is
You're
the
good.
actual sheet.
Okay, that'll work
This
better actually. Yeah.
is, yeah, I pulled up, I went through every single game that was played after season 20 across
Oh
every
wow.
single
Okay.
region from EMEA, North America, APAC, North, South. And I went back and I manually put in where teams were dropping regarding their POI and then their average points per POI there. And then, of course, all the game stats alongside that. And then, of course, I compiled it in Python using some quick coding. And you can do cool stuff like looking at where's the best POI? What's the best kind of place you can get in Stormpoint versus, say, World's Edge? And so I provided some examples there, and you can see where I pulled, like, for example, teams that land at Pylon. You got to see all the examples of Pylon after season 20 from teams like Gaiman to Legacy to North Eption to Wonton
Can you
Dumpling.
direct
And
me to
you
where that is on here, just so I can? Oh, okay. We're talking up here in like
Yeah.
V4 area, right? V5. Yeah. Okay, I see you.
Yes. Yeah, you can see. So that is every individual game in the V column for every single team.
Interesting.
and the entire across season 20 post. And so that is then I went into Python, which is not on there, but it's part of the images I sent you. Those
Right.
images are
Yeah.
actually pulled directly from some some coding that I do, and just highlighting exactly what POIs are the best, and you can really look into it and start going deeper and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know about everyone else, but
I
I love the stats. I
yeah.
love getting deep. I love really scrying behind the curtain, behind the direct gameplay that you see, because the truth is, we have a lot of preconceived notions and biases, and
Right.
numbers don't lie, right? Numbers are a great thing to look at. And also, I mean, they don't at the end of the day explain every notion to Apex, and not every variable can be explained. But I'll
Right.
tell you what, they tell a damn good story, and that's
They
that's
do.
my job first and foremost.
And this is interesting too because this is kind of the stuff I want to dive into on this, in this platform is just bringing light to the information pool that I think is needed to succeed at a higher level. Whether you're like a caster or a coach or a player, you do kind of need to dive into these things. And I think the average player that's looking to excel and try to get into pro league or even just perform high level challenger circuit
Mhm.
or coach a team, they don't realize that, maybe not always realize that this is, a big aspect of it, right? Looking into this type of data and trying to understand these types of things is very important information and work that you don't really see behind the scenes.
No, I think I would feel silly if I said I was the only one doing this, because that's
Oh,
just not
absolutely.
true.
Right.
There's hundreds of statisticians and other really really smart people out there, whether it's the players themselves or even the staff that's hired alongside some of these teams that are helping make this kind of information more apparent, right? And it
Right.
does influence a lot of decisions. I mean, I take some of this data all the time, and I pull it back to say like my collegiate team, and I there's a reason we start at certain POIs. There's a reason we rotate the way we do, right?
Right.
It comes directly from mirroring what has been seen to succeed and what doesn't succeed. So,
Right.
um, and then of course as a caster, I trust me, if I could drabble all day long about some of the stuff, we'd literally the cast would go on for 12 hours straight.
Oh,
But
I
I
bet.
I can't. I can't.
Exactly. No, I understand that. So I do want to, I'm really glad you brought that up because this is all really like interesting information and dives into a little bit of what I'm trying to highlight here, kind of in this discussion about the work and how it
Mhm.
applies to other aspects of the game. So I kind of asked you a little bit about that preparation. Obviously, you're showing all of that. How I kind of want to take a little bit of a percentage, if you could like or fraction it out. How much time
Sure.
would you say preparing? Would you Are you dedicating to like just getting better at casting? How much of it is spent learning like the teams and how they specifically play the game? And how much of it's spent learning like the game itself? I imagine it fluctuates season to season. Like season 20
Yeah,
probably
of course.
gave you a little bit more about the game. But yeah, how would you say you parse that out?
Yeah, so first and foremost always is going to be the teams, and anything that's oriented towards team statistics, data, narrative, etc.
Right.
Right? That makes up the hard majority, right? I mean, this what I just provide, that's statistics, right? I mean, that's hard data, but there's also alongside that some of the narrative work that we do, which is just spelling out the stories. Like if you were to ask me about any EMEA team, especially too, right? I mean, that's my favorite region, and I could tell you the long time story of how they got from A to Z, right? And that's really
Right.
important because even if you don't express that on the broadcast, it does influence. Like, there's little funny moments that you get to take advantage of because you put in the research.
Right.
When you see Unlucky, find his way up against Tyler, right? Even though
Yep.
they're on different teams, that's a more obvious one, but like it's fun to say, that's the previous teammate, back when they were together, years alongside each other from Bosch to Vex to now this,
Yeah.
right? And that's tiny stuff, but that makes up a huge chunk of where I put my effort. In terms of the other two, learning the game, I definitely pull a lot of my knowledge about the game from watching either say scrims or the pro matches or anything I can get my hands on regarding highly competitive teams. But in terms of like getting in there myself, it makes up a much lower percent than you would think. I do
Okay.
think like for really really big updates like season 16 or season 20, Like I'm there, I'm playing the game because there's no better way to understand what you're seeing than, of course, more hands-on. But at the same time, I'm not the best Apex player, and even some of the best Apex players who play Apex on the regular are nowhere comparable to what we see out of the pros, which is ultimately what I cover. So I
Right.
don't want my biases to come from a place of, oh well, this is what worked out for me, and this is what I'm seeing. When in reality, it's for a pro, it goes 10 steps further. So I'll
Right.
get in, I'll flesh things out, but ultimately watching and seeing and casting is definitely a big part of where I learn. And then of course the last thing you brought up, or the first one, uh me, putting into work as a caster directly. I think when I started out, that was a lot of a bigger thing. Here's a hush hush secret that I don't really brag about often, but there's things like VOD reviews that
Right.
casters do. I've never done a VOD review before. I've never, not even once.
Interesting. Okay.
I've literally just woke up one day and started casting. Something that I've always said about myself in casting is that I kind of know when I'm making a mistake, and I know
Right.
when I can do something a little bit better. And I mean, I definitely get told all the time, whether it's like either on Reddit or from my co-casters. Don't get me wrong, we talk. If there's something
Right.
that you want to like, coming up with Dia was a huge boom for me because that guy is great at communicating what he thought was great about a cast, what he thought was bad, and where you can be maybe working either on yourself or potentially your co-caster. And so I think initially, yes, but especially now, like obviously there's always things we can be working on. But a lot of my casting is more so impacted from the work I do behind the scenes regarding the teams and such, rather than me specifically as a caster. Because at the end of the day, I wouldn't be on ALGS if my fundamentals and the raw stuff was not already super duper good.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So, and just to clarify, when you say VOD review, you mean you're not VOD reviewing your own footage. You do still VOD review, obviously, pro players,
Oh
scrims, things
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
not your own
I
footage,
don't.
which makes
Yeah.
sense.
There are casters who go back, and trust me, it's the majority who go back and watch their own casting to see what they could be doing better. I definitely am more someone who kind of hits the notes in the moment
Right.
and has takeaways from them. So I don't ever really take the time. And then of course, when you then look into the fact that I'm VOD reviewing teams more directly and the players and the scrims and stuff, kind of makes a lot of sense where my time's going.
Right. And honestly, I think you're right that that's just once you've gotten those things down to you, it makes more sense to dive into the game itself, the players, that kind of stuff to know what you're talking about going into the game
Right.
days. I want to go further into this and talk a little bit. Well, for actually really quick, I did have one question that I needed to
Sure.
ask because I was going to reference this at some point. So I want to talk about not really talk about that specifically just for time's sake, but you hosted a third party tournament in EU, and you just mentioned
Yeah.
now that EU is your favorite region. In just like a Spark Notes version, why is EU your favorite region?
Well, of course, it is where I got my start
Okay.
doing Challenger Circuit. I did Challenger Circuit for EMEA, and I think that's definitely the place where, or at least the big place, kind of where I guess that all began. Because doing Challenger Circuit and speaking with the players there, and then those some of which are now Pro League players, and then of
Right.
course, then when Versus took over, I had to make it, especially after some of the incidents that occurred during, I believe, year two
Hmm.
with Ukraine. I had to jump in very, very quickly and do a secondary kind of like B stream esque broadcast for like 7, 8 days straight. And so I definitely got to chat and discuss with a lot of the pros then and there for EMEA. And so I think just having more proximity to it over the years has definitely cultivated a lot of my not only expertise, but also just the fact that it feels more like home for me
Right.
regarding the regions. If I had started in North America, I probably would have said the same. And that's not to say I don't put in the time or the desire to learn about North America. It's just the raw fact that I was working during or working and doing EMEA stuff, and so as a result, I met EMEA people, and that's kind of where I've gotten the most of my support from regarding the community. And so, I love them. Love, 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 love them.
That's so interesting because I think I've always enjoyed watching Amiya's like pro league as well because
Yeah.
I first got into competitive Apex because I was playing the game and I just got on Twitch and I was looking for people to watch, and funny enough I was like, well, obviously I'm going to watch Apex because that's what I'm playing, and I stumbled
Right.
across Matafe on Twitch,
Mm, mhm.
and he was the first real streamer that I ever watched and got into Apex competitive. And this was back during like Pathfinder, Watson, Wraith
Oh
meta,
yeah.
and he was on Ad Hoc Gaming with Zephyr and Zephyr. And it was just like such a weird time to get. I don't know. I do always have a little bit of a. I really do enjoy going back and watching EMEA for those reasons, because it's where I started watching, kind of similar to you. So that was interesting. I just wanted to ask that because I was curious. Um,
Yeah.
I want to move on to like some of your coaching aspects and the translation here. So obviously you
Sure.
mentioned you started with Challenger Circuit and then you went into casting ALGS, and somewhere in that intermediary, and I don't know if it's still continuing on, but you
Mhm.
started coaching for Collegiate, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Texas A&M University, is that right?
Correct. That's where
And
I go. That's where I am
right.
currently a student.
Okay, so and then so that's obviously okay. That helps answer one of the two questions of how you got started into it. Obviously, you're going there, but I wanted to ask how, as a caster, right? You're learning all about
Sure.
this game from an observer's perspective. How did you feel like moving? How was the transition moving from a caster to being a coach in the same esport? Do you feel like that it helped you? Was there a big gap in transition? How, in what ways did it prepare you for that?
Sure. I think when it comes down to casting, especially, it may not seem like it, but we are some of the most knowledgeable people about Apex Legends,
Right.
right? At least I consider myself to be, kind of leaning more on that color aspect. And I'd never felt for one second that I was lacking any kind of information. And I mean, it got to the point where, even before I was coaching, I would cast tournaments like I'm so sad this VOD doesn't exist because it's one of my favorite moments of all time. I was casting like a Steel Series APAC tournament, and the game was maybe 2 minutes in. I said, okay, this is the team that will win the game, right?
Mm,
I just said it. I don't usually do that because
right.
as a caster, you're supposed to kind of create narratives, but I was having fun with B-Rad at the time, and I said, this is the
Right.
team that will win the game. 15 minutes later, they won the game,
Yep.
right? There is 100 of thousands of patterns in Apex Legends, and it is, it's gotten a little bit harder, especially with some recent changes, but most of the time you can really see the future in many, many, many ways. And so,
I want to pause you there.
sure.
You just said, and until like obviously now, I can't. I immediately slipped my mind of exactly how you phrase it. It sounded like there's something recent that changed that makes it less predictable. Do you want to dive into that?
Very quickly, I will say that post the ring changes, there was an unmistakable ability to get like that first scan and immediately know pretty much where the zone was going to end.
Right.
And it's not entirely impossible, but it has gotten definitely a little bit more cloudy regarding the absolute certainty regarding getting into the zone after the first ring scan. The second ring scan, you sure as shit should know where you're going,
Right.
right?
Okay.
But there used to be you could literally get just that first ring and instantly have one of the best understandings of where your team needed to be. And of course, when they increased the size of that first ring and made all the timing changes,
Right.
that kind of threw a little thorn. And teams have definitely adapted around that. Um, but it isn't it you don't play it quite the same anymore, right? There
Right.
is a general understanding more of the rotations for these zones. And there I guess there's probably some pros out there who are going to listen to this and say, "Oh, absolutely not. I can get the first ring scan and go immediately." But I think at least in my eyes the consensus is that it's not as certain as it once was.
Okay. Obviously, I saw you place second place with your team, so also congratulations
Many
for that.
times.
Many times, right? No first yet.
No first
No
yet.
first. We'll get it. We'll
No
get it. Are
first.
you still coaching, I
Match
assume?
point. Yeah. So, yeah, I am coaching. I jumped on to coach them in February of 2023 after Texas A&M was invited to compete in the $25,000 TSM University tournament directly because we were partnered with them.
Right.
And what ended up happening is A&M did not have an Apex team at all, and they were going to be competing in that tournament a month from whenever the announcement was in
Oh wow.
February. And pretty much me, uh, and then notably three players, uh, Anthony Noyes, Jackson McLaughlin, and Ralph Vicente. came together and basically they're like, we can maybe give it a try. We've played Apex before. And I swooped in and I said, if you guys are going to be the three that are giving it a try, let me help you. Let
Right.
me let me put you guys in the right direction, whether it's scrims or the competitive tournament or whatever. And so we immediately jumped in, and within a month, I shaped them up, and we went from literally a team that could only place 18th, 19th, 20th against other collegiate teams to coming in second on the day of for the TSMU tournament. And then, of course, Octane Collegiate exploded, and that's
Right.
where a lot of you see the competition for collegiate is now. And Texas A&M has had a great record throughout there in these last few splits, and has consistently made it to match point finals where they consistently have had the most points on the day of
That's
and
what we want to see.
consistently finish in second,
Not what we want
which
to see, but
is
we'll get there, right?
we will get there. A lot of those guys are seniors, and so they're about to graduate, and so I think the stories have definitely kind of petered out for the time being as they're
Right.
working through finishing up their degrees. But at least for me as a coach, I've never been more proud of what I was able to do with that roster these last 14 months, turning them from just a couple of guys who've played Apex a few times to easily one of the more respected teams in collegiate for Apex.
That's awesome. I want to go into that. So you're talking about Collegiate Apex, and you have that experience there, and you said you've also had Challenger Circuit experience and now and Pro League, obviously. In what ways do the three differ? And specifically, how do high Challenger Circuit and Collegiate teams, what are they lacking that keeps them from excelling to the Pro League level? So obviously, we see, in other collegiate sports, you have this competitive drive that drives you into the pro aspect of that sport, right? So
Sure.
we'd like to believe, obviously, in high challenger circuit and even collegiate level, the goal is to drive you towards professional capabilities as an end goal.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think that they are lacking, or just how does it differ that keeps them from being in the pro league?
I think first and foremost, and I don't mean this as a diss to any of the tier levels, but Pro League really is on a different skill ceiling. Um, I can count maybe on one hand the amount of teams that have come through from Challenger Circuit that had really true, fresh, new talent that were also able to keep up and place like well within the top 15 or 10
Right.
um, after their start. And most of the time, some of those rosters coming from Challenger Circuit or PLQs have literally had prior pros on them. And
Right.
so just having that background, that experience, and then, being on that level is the number one biggest difference. And the truth is, you can only really get that experience from playing on the pro level for a very long, extended period. And for those out there, they might not think, oh, Challenger Circuit can't possibly be that great of a gap between them and Pro League. But the truth is, you don't start learning how Pro League really, really works as a competitor until you are in it. Challenger Circuit is one of the scariest and hardest things because the truth is, you have to learn how to play Challenger Circuit, which is its own definitive beast. And
Right.
even if you are incredible and an amazing Challenger Circuit competitor, once you get through that gauntlet, which it truly is, it is a punishing, grueling gauntlet. The minute you get into Pro League, you quickly learn that it is a completely different style. The teams are a different caliber, and you're having to adjust on the fly, and the weeks are flying by. Right? I mean, you are accruing points whether you like it or not, and that's the difference between you getting to stay and continuing to get this practice, or you being sent back to what could potentially be your end. Right?
Right.
And so that is an insane thing, and for all those teams that continually make that jump every single split, my heart goes out to them because it is, like I said before in many other different ways, a bitch and a half, right?
Right.
And so, I think that's the biggest gap. I don't think it is inherently like they're just doing something wrong. Like, of course, they'll make mistakes, and you'll see that in Pro League, but getting that experience and that threshold is a huge part. And then, of course, for collegiate's still fresh. It's
Right.
still very, very new. Talk to me a year ago, and we didn't even have a collegiate league. And obviously, it's something that I hope to see, really balloon in the next few years, get some professional support, especially maybe have EA fly in and send these teams in a direction where they can start, pushing towards something that's a bit more tangible, and then getting some eyes on them where maybe teams begin to pick them up, whether it be in the CC or even, hey, in, Pro League.
Right.
But the truth
Yeah.
is, the gap is widely, between even Challenger Circuit and Collegiate, that gap is crazy, right?
S-
Because you come down to whoever you have at your college. And some
Right.
colleges are stacked. You go to UQTR, where they have, Riley Mechanac and Cobra, who are
Right.
both pro league tested caliber, basically, right? And are literally wiping lobbies without even blinking. And then on the opposite end of the field, you have some rosters who literally they're platinum, diamond level at their
Right.
very, very best. And so, because of that huge disparity, collegiate will always, at least for the time being, until it is more readily accessible and players are going into college knowing they're going to be playing
Playing on these
competitive
teams. Yeah.
Apex, that's when you'll start to see that kind of experience increase. And that's not to say there hasn't been some incredible players to come out of collegiate that I respect and would look at and say, maybe they could make it through Challenger Circuit. But the truth is, the large majority, probably not. You would need to put in a lot more time, a lot more effort, and literally see yourself through something like CC for a while to maybe make that giant step or improvement.
Okay. So then that kind of does lead into another question that I think is something that's on everyone's mind pretty much constantly when talking about Apex competitive is, I mean, we see obviously we have a lot of orgs re-entering because of this
Mhm.
land and some other rumors. I'm not going to rumor mill, so I won't speak
Yeah,
on
of
those.
course.
But we have, obviously orgs are re-entering, but there's always this question of, is the esport growing or shrinking? You obviously have a unique perspective coming from a lot of different angles on this, but there's still, is it growing or shrinking as an esport, would you say? And is the game getting more competitive or less competitive? Because the fact that only two teams have still won and that continues to go on, and with performance in NA, it really doesn't seem like DZ or TSM could lose, except for maybe to Moist, which is a whole different discussion. Do you feel like this esport is growing? Do you feel like it's getting more competitive? Do you think it's getting less competitive? Is it shrinking? How would you chime in on that?
I definitely think Apex is getting more competitive. Right?
Okay.
At the end of the day, looking back at teams from year two, back when we used to have 40 teams per pro league, and seeing the bottom echelon and the caliber of so many of these rosters, and seeing what exists now today, it is a huge, huge difference. Right? There's some rosters that I even in the upper 20s who would have a hard time keeping their spot within some of the pro league iterations that we have currently in this current split. And so I definitely think the game and the talent of these players have gotten better and better as time has gone on, which I consider a blessing to get to see because that's super, super cool. Do I think TSM and Dark Zero all winning all the time is something that detracts from that? No. It just goes to show how incredible those rosters are, and those
Absolutely.
that set of six players there. And so, and of course their supporting staff as well.
Right.
And so I think that's less of a caveat regarding Apex and more just a huge praise to them. And especially regarding the future with Apex. Obviously, I can't share the background information I know,
Right.
um, but I see it as only up from here. And especially as someone who came from what was the first start of ALGS, where we had year two come into the mix with its certain structure and format, and how consistently things, even give and take, it takes time, right? They have slowly improved. I mean, it has been a great thing to witness, especially seeing some of those problems and some of those issues be rectified. And it's a growing process that EA and Respawn both, of course, know about. And so having that occur alongside just the beast that is the esport itself, I think it has only gotten better, right? And so I am here to predict and say that it will continue to get better. And I don't think it has anything to do with the individual orgs rejoining or where we go for LAN
Right.
or what teams are winning, but just the overall comparison between where we started and where we are now. And if that's the case, I can only imagine what it will look like 3 or 4 years from now, as we continue to figure things out, whether it be as a player, a team, EA, myself, casters, producers, whatever.
That's exciting to hear. I think that's definitely something that a lot of people are going to look forward to hearing from you. I want to ask two very short questions, and then
Sure.
I'll let you out of here. They're both regarding. Obviously, we have Split One, Year 4 LAN, and I try not to do too much current event stuff, but
Hmm.
I want to talk specifically about a few things regarding that. So, short
Sure.
questions, short answers, a few sentences. The big one is obviously we've talked about this. DZ, TSM, these are the two that have won a LAN, right? They've won match point.
Of course.
And whether you call that double NA team, I personally call that NA and Apex South. And I am
Yeah.
gonna eventually.
Me too.
I'm hoping to get somebody on to talk specifically about those two regions, because I have some hot takes on that. But I really want to ask you in a short form, what are the core issues that are holding back other regions from claiming that title?
Well, you know how I just discussed the experience level regarding between getting the opportunity of Challenger Circuit versus Pro League versus Collegiate.
Right.
There is a very minor but similar issue regarding the competitive nature between these regions,
Yeah.
right? Um, I think personally, I've always had kind of like this is my personal bias towards each region, but I've always thought that North America has the highest caliber talent that also gets some of the more tournaments, especially earlier
Absolutely.
when we
Yeah.
were just starting. And on top of that, the ability to practice alongside each other. Of course, when it came down to um, specifically APAC South, I think they have an incredible wealth of talent who also put in a lot of work. If you had any idea how hard some of the best teams from that region are actually working to
Right.
get to the caliber that they are, I mean, that would be just an insane discussion. For APAC North, I've always thought that there's some great options there that have some issues regarding the certain playstyles and that pace of aggression. And I think that has slowly begun to rectify itself over the years, but it is definitely still a um, thing that they are continually working on. And of course, for
Right.
EMEA, that's my baby. I love them. Never forget that that region was thrown into an absolute chaotic
Yes, absolutely.
place during year two
Yep.
and have always been on the kind of ember growing side of putting themselves back together and finding their best foot forward. Because for every single time that they take a step forward, it seems like some of these other regions are taking a huge chunk more, right? And
Right.
so I think when it comes down to it, I love EMEA. I want to see them succeed. I want to see them win playoffs. I'm totally biased,
Yep.
but it's going to come with the growth, the effort, and shout out to ExoClan hosting scrims for as long as they
Huge.
have recently, and anyone previously. I mean, they're coming. They're
Yep.
coming.
Last question. Give
Sure.
me one hot take and one cold take. Maybe the other way around. Give me one cold take, one hot take coming into Split One LAN.
Okay. The coldest of takes would always be that Dark Zero and TSM are going to win.
Fair
And
enough.
I and everyone's going to say that, but I really do truly believe it in many ways because especially watching the recent international scrim results. Now, granted, they are on ping for North America and they're going to look crazy, but like sometimes just watching either one of those two rosters compete and just even thinking about the concept of another team winning is just like,
Yeah. It seems far out.
holy
Moist. Maybe
shit.
moist. If it's anyone, it's moist. No, we're not feeling it. We could talk about this later. We could
I
probably.
I'm warming up to the concept. I'm just there's a lot of growing pains, of course,
Absolutely.
across the board, and especially catching up to those two monsters is going to be really, really
Oh yeah.
hard. So I'm not, my heart isn't set out on Moist, especially after recently watching. Granted, they've had some sub issues for some of these scrims,
Right.
but they have been in a rough spot. I don't know if I have a hot take.
How about this?
Sure.
You have to have one team, any other region that you is your front runner to win LAN. If it's not DZTSM, not NA, who is the one team from another region you think could take it? Obviously, there are a lot that could, and I don't
Mhm.
want to put out any favoritism, but just if you're looking, maybe if you want to take it from a statistical approach, you can do that too. However you
Sure.
think.
I personally, this is a hard one. If I to give you the all opposing regions, in my opinion,
Okay.
I think from APAC North, I am most looking, of course, at Reject Winity again.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm with
always
you on
going to
that
be
one.
biased towards Legends Gaming. I think they have a
100%.
different caliber, and I'm excited to see what they do at this LAN. That's
Yeah.
not very shocking. And then, oh man, EMEA is gonna kill me for saying this, but '07,
Oh,
I am
07. Yeah, I'm kind
I'm
of with you on
always
that.
excited to see what Nasky does at LAN. Not because inherently I'm sitting here thinking, oh, this guy's gonna win it all, but because for some reason Nasky's there.
He's
And he
always there.
always manages to push into the finals and
Oh yeah.
always represents EMEA well. And while some things have ebbed and flowed, like Alliance,
Yep.
who now I have to worry about more,
Yeah,
even though
100%.
they're looking good right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Last land scared the shit out of me,
Yep.
and I'm usually very biased. I can always, for some reason, put my faith in Nasky and
Yep.
whoever he's got alongside him. And of course, right now between Amphi and Nags, looking pretty good. But if you want the bias answer, 2R1C.
Oh
Let's
yeah.
go! Love 2R1C.
All right. Well, there you have
Or
it.
Navi. I love Tyler.
I
Tyler's
want to
my boy.
see Matafe win. You know, I'm a OG
I didn't say
stan,
that. I
so.
said Tyler's my boy.
Fair enough. Hey, well, thank you so much for all of this
All right.
today. I think that we got a lot of information that a lot of people could actually take and apply to how they're
Sure,
approaching the
yeah.
game. So I do really appreciate that and the time you're able to give in for this. And hopefully we'll talk soon. And if I see you at LAN, which I'm hoping to be able to go, I'll buy you a beer if you drink. If you don't drink, I'll buy you a soda.
No drinky for Zephyrs.
I'll buy you
forever.
a food item.
Oh,
I don't know. There you go.
yes.
I'll buy you ramen.
Okay.
How about that? That's a move.
Oh,
There
okay.
we go.
It's a deal.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for your time, and
no
have a
worries.
good one.
Thank you, Burke.
Yep. See it. I almost forgot to mention, if you don't already, make sure you go over and follow Zephyr Casts over on Twitter. That is ZEPHYR Casts over on Twitter. And if you like this video and you want to see more of your favorite casters, creators on a video like this in podcast form, then go ahead and put them in the comments and put in the comments topics you'd like to see in a future episode. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.